So hello everyone, thank you so much for choosing to come to my presentation. I've had such a lovely day so far and I hope that you have too. I've definitely got some imposter syndrome going on just based on the talks that I've been watching throughout the day. They've been fantastic so far. And I would just like to say a big thank you to Emma Kell for giving me a little bit of a nudge and encouraging me to talk today. It wasn't something that I had my hand up for initially, but I've definitely tried to be 10% braver. So let's get going. So this is about delighting and engaging our most vulnerable students. So some of you might have read the bio that came along with this, so you might have already read a little bit of background about me. So my name is Jo Slifi. I'm going to talk a little bit about the provision that I work at in just a moment. But you may have already read that I was an early school leaver myself. I went straight out of school at the age of 16 and I started to work in the hospitality industry. My first job was at Costa Coffee. No one's been there for a while, have they? But I hear they're starting to reopen now. So my first job was in customer service. I had to go and do some really intense training. Costa Coffee have got a big roastery that's based in Lambeth. And I remember going up on the train, which was probably quite a big deal to 16-year-old me, and going through all of the training. And just remembering you could smell the coffee beans about 10 miles before you got to the roastery. So my background is, and always has been, in delighting customers. This is something that Costa Coffee really pushed. They were relentless about it. They really encouraged us as members of staff to try and find ways to delight our customers. So every customer should feel like a VIP. I feel like that was their tagline at the time. And we would do all sorts of things just to try and make somebody's day. And that sounds really trite, and I know it does. But actually it was a lot of fun. We'd do little things like we'd spot a customer that was maybe a regular customer and we'd make their drink ready for them before they got to the front of the queue. I was terrible. I would sneak in extra slices of cake here, there and everywhere. Got into trouble for that a few times. But we'd buy in special newspapers and things like that, and we'd reserve tables that we knew that customers wanted to sit at. Just little things, but that would make a bit of a difference. And actually what we saw from doing those few things in order to try to delight customers was that customers kept coming back. They rewarded us with their loyalty. They didn't go elsewhere. And we were able to make some really good connections with our customers. Often we'd ask about their own families and their own children. And it was a great thing to do. So I finally came to my senses and realised I was in the wrong industry. It didn't take me very long. I wanted to be right where the action is, and that is in education, as we all know. And I wanted to sneak back some of what I'd learnt in the hospitality industry and use it in education. So that's primarily what I'm wanting to talk to you about today. So just a little bit about where I've landed now. So I work for Aspire Alternative Provision. You may have heard of us. We are a multi-academy trust. So we've got 3 pupil referral unit sites in Bucks for students that have been excluded from their mainstream schools. And we've got 4 medical provisions as well. So I work at Orchard House. We're one of the medical provisions. I'm so lucky to work there, and I'm so pleased it's where I've landed. So we offer a short-term temporary service for students that are not able to access their mainstream schools, their mainstream education, and it's generally for mental health reasons. So while students access some support and some therapy, they're able to come to Orchard House in order to try to bridge a bit of a gap for their learning. So I am coming at this from a very small specialist setting, but I would like to reassure you that I've also worked in mainstream, I've worked in primary, secondary, and preschool. So none of what I'm going to talk about today can only be delivered in a specialist setting. So you're in the right place. I'm hoping that you feel that you're in the right place. So there are just three, I know that caveats are really boring, and I'm sorry, and I'm just going to go through these three things really quickly. There are three caveats that I just want to have acknowledged before I dive in. One is that I know that every educator, everyone in the education sector is absolutely knackered at the moment. We're all just maxed out. Coronavirus has not been kind to our industry, and I understand that. And I'm sitting here today encouraging you to delight your students, and I understand that that things have been really difficult for us. We're maxed out at the best of times anyway. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir already when I'm talking about special interventions for students. So thank you for letting me preach, is what I want to say. Secondly is a point about self-care. I know that some people find that the concept just nauseating. You're not going to be able to do any of these things. You're not going to be able to delight and engage your students if you are trying to pour from an empty cup. I've tried to do it lots of times. It's not going to happen. If you are not taking the absolute best care of yourself, physically and mentally, and managing your stress levels, there's no way that you're going to effectively be able to delight and engage students. And it's been used so much recently, but it is that whole analogy about you putting on the life jacket first. And I know that people might see self-care as weakness or as self-indulgence, but I think we all need to be really encouraging it and trying to do away with seeing it as something that's not necessary. Third caveat, really quickly, is that I know I work in a very niche setting. I have said this, but these ideas can be adapted and used within mainstream settings too. So let's dig in. You are going to have to forgive my clip art and my PowerPoints. I'm not an IT person. Some of the presentations today have been very highbrow. So I'm hoping that you're going to forgive mine because they're not highbrow, but they're just some little prompts as we go, because this is going to be quite a chatty session. So the first thing I'd really like to talk about is a concept that was introduced to me by Sean Covey. People know his dad pretty well. His dad is Stephen Covey, and he wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Again, that book was a little bit highbrow for me. It is on my bookshelf. I'm not convinced I've ever made it all the way through. Sean Covey wrote the kind of teenage spin-off of that book, which I've enjoyed a lot more. And it's one of those books on my shelf that's just falling apart. I've been back to it so many times. The cover's come off and it's ripped, and I'm digging into this all the time because there's some really good stuff in it. So if you're able to get your hands on this, so it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens by Sean Covey. If you're able to get your hands on it, it's gold. It's not current though by any means. It's been out for a good couple of decades, I think. But Sean talks about relationships as bank accounts. And I really love this analogy. And I bring myself back to it all the time. So we're talking about our student relationships today, our working relationships with our students. And Sean Covey encourages us to think about these as bank accounts. So positive interactions with our students are akin to making deposits into our bank accounts. And anything that doesn't go so well is akin to making a withdrawal from the relationship bank accounts. I really like thinking alongside our student working relationships in these terms, because I think It's also reflective of the fact that relationships take a long time to build up, and they are built on lots and lots of these micro connections, these everyday things, the smile in the morning, you know, the work waiting in the lessons, the little things that we remember about students. All of these things are small deposits into the bank accounts in terms of our working relationships. So I love that analogy. If you're not keen on that, if you're a child of the 90s like I am, you might have played the game Sims. It's not the game Sims that we play now at school. It's kind of ruined it for me, really, if I'm honest, because now we have to put behaviour points on Sims and achievement points. Whereas before, to my innocent 90s child self, Sims was a brilliant game that you'd play on the computer. I think it's out on everything now. And you would have a character, and your character would interact with other Sims, and you'd get these little plus signs. I think you can see them in the picture. And every time your character had a positive interaction with another character, you'd get a little plus sign. And I love thinking about these in real life, and I kind of wish they were there, because you would just be able to see how each of these small micro connections is contributing overall to a really positive working relationship. So I just really enjoyed those analogies, and I think they're important when we're looking at student engagement. Neither of these approaches is tokenistic. We can't develop a really strong working relationship with a student in an hour. It takes time, and it's made up over time. And I think also it's reflective of the fact that if we have got a good working relationship with our students, and something does go wrong, that the whole thing doesn't fall apart. We can make small withdrawals sometimes without meaning to, without sacrificing the overall working relationship. Oh, goodness me, you're going to have to forgive the next slide. It's just some dodgy clip art going on. I will explain it. I don't think anyone's going to be asking me for the slides afterwards, are they? So something that's come out of lockdown that I think is really funny is the kind of concept of, ooh, your kid is showing. There's been lots of this on the news. I don't know if anyone's managed to catch anything live, but it's been absolutely brilliant. Newscasters working at home, the doors flung open in the background, and their children have run into the room, you know, asked to go to the toilet, wanting biscuits. It's your kid is showing. That, you know, so many of us have experienced those moments, and I certainly have. Throughout lockdown, I've been at home with my 4-year-old son 24/7, and I've had a lot of those moments, the your kid is showing moments. And initially I was, goodness me, I was so embarrassed. I'd be trying to work, I'd be trying to call parents, I'd be trying to deal with situations, and my little boy would pop up in the background, usually about here, whether it was on a video call or on the phone. And I think lots of us have had to deal with that over lockdown. And like I say, initially, I was really embarrassed about it. But actually, I think something pretty cool has come out of it. I think it has strengthened my relationships with students and families. And it's made me really consider my own professional boundaries and what I'm willing to share with people. I think usually we like to keep ourselves to ourselves as teachers. We might share one or two tidbits about our normal life, but generally we don't tend to do that at school. And I think lockdown has almost forced some of us to need to do this. And I only see positives having come from it. So after initially being really embarrassed, it then sparked conversations later on. And now I'll get parents calling, and they will ask after my son, and they will ask whether he's had any biscuits today. And I just think that's lovely, and it's something that I would really like to keep. And I think we could all relook at our professional boundaries and whether or not there's a little bit more that we can share. And that really got me thinking. I'm terming this the Sainsbury's effect. I need you to bear with me while I try and explain what I mean. I'm going to share a little memory with you. I must have been about 14 or 15. I remember being in Sainsbury's on a Saturday with my dad, turning into the next aisle with our trolley, and I spotted one of my school teachers. And I remember just feeling absolutely mortified. I was terrified they'd see me. I was terrified that they would know that I'd seen them. I genuinely had no idea what they could possibly be doing in a supermarket on a Saturday. And there's definitely this disconnect, isn't there? And I'm really keen to look at why students don't see us as human beings first, before they see us as teachers all the time. And I think that memory has stayed with me. And I'd like to think that if we share a little bit more about ourselves and our own lives, and maybe address some of those power imbalances, there's always going to be a power imbalance when a teacher is talking to a student or to a family. But I think by sharing a little bit more of ourselves, we can de-alienize ourselves as teachers just that little bit. And you never know, you might get a wave in Sainsbury's. I certainly hope if any of my students saw me in Sainsbury's that they might say hi even and feel slightly less mortified than I did. Now I could sing this, but I'm not going to. I need a hero. I think with this slide, I've been thinking about this a lot over lockdown. And I think as members of staff and in this profession, we are all massively time crunched all the time. And we're here because we want to help people. Generally, that's why people go into teaching. They love that connection. They love being able to help. And we want to get to the point. We want to get straight down into the detail. I definitely want to put my cape on and swoop down and rescue people. And all of that feels really good and really exciting. I think sometimes though, I have done that, and I've thought that I've known how to rescue somebody. And sometimes that hasn't always been the right thing. And I think sometimes we need to acknowledge that before we even have a chance of being able to rescue or to help somebody, we really need to take a few steps back and just take some time to appreciate the unique human experience that's going on and be able to acknowledge this before we do our rescuing. And I also think we've got a much better chance of being able to engage our students if we take those steps back and take the time to do that. So this is another Stephen Covey. So seeking first to understand. Look, I haven't even referenced him there. I'm going to be in big trouble. I think I might need to add that in. So these books have been really influential, and they're about listening. And listening is a skill that I have been working on. And I have found that it's really paid dividends in terms of, well, there's another banking analogy for you there, dividends. It's paid dividends in terms of being able to engage students more effectively. I'm a great talker and a great chatter, and I've always thought that I've been a great listener, but actually there's a real study, there's a real background to listening, and these two books have been fantastic. So How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. If any of you have read this, I'd be really interested in knowing what your take homes were from it. My major take home was the concept of giving students what they want in fantasy. when we're talking to them and when we're listening to them. This sounds like such an odd concept, and I'm going to explain what I mean. And I think it feels counterintuitive, but it's definitely gold. I'm convinced that it's gold. So I'll give you an example. So you might work in a secondary setting. You might have a really grumpy year 10 that comes in, that's not having it today, that got out of the wrong side of bed, they're late, they haven't got their books, they're definitely not going into maths. You know the scenario. I know that some of you are in primary sectors as well, and I'm sure you get grumpy primary school kids too. I think the initial sort of instinct is, as far as teaching staff, would be to chivvy. We're really good at chivying. Come on, you know, you're here now. Great that you're in the door. We're going to make this a good day. Off you go to your class. I'm going to help you. I'm going to go and tell Miss why you're late. And just to chivvy along. And I think a lot of our profession is about chivying. And that's why we're so exhausted all the time, because we do a lot of chivying. But in this example, using the idea of giving students what they want in fantasy before we do the chivying, I truly believe is gold. So in this example, if you were able to just for a moment, say something along the lines of, you're really exhausted, aren't you? You wish you could stay under your duvet all day long. You wish you didn't have to crawl out from under your duvet at all today. You'd have stayed there for a full 10 hours if you could, wouldn't you? Just to say something along those lines, just to acknowledge that feeling, and to give that student what they want in fantasy before you get to the chivying. I have found that to be really effective. It works really well when teachers are moaning about when students are moaning about other teachers. Does anyone have that? Oh, you know, I need to invent a fictional teacher now. Oh, I hate Mrs. Banks and I don't like how she teaches maths, and she's really boring. And our instinct is to go, no, Mrs. Banks is a great teacher. You mustn't say that. And again, to give students what they want in fantasy is a great disarmer. So even just something along the poor Mrs. Banks, I mean, we must protect her, but something along the lines of, you really don't like maths. I hear that you really don't like maths. You wish you could do double drama and you would burn all of your maths books if you could. Giving that student what they want in fantasy. Of course they can't burn their maths books. The student knows that you're not being literal. Most students would know that you're not being literal. You might have to be careful there with one or two. But just giving that student what they want in fantasy before then saying, you can't say that about your maths teacher. Come on, let's get you over to maths. I think for me has just been a bit of a breakthrough with certain students. You can see it in their faces. They're cross and they're angry or they're exasperated. And as soon as you just for a moment give them what they want in fantasy, or just acknowledge what they're saying, the relief descends, and you can get on with your day. You're much more likely to have a positive interaction then with that student and be able to do the chivying that needs to be done and to get them to where they need to be. Philippa Perry talks about acknowledging feelings as well. She's brilliant, Philippa Perry. I wish I had discovered her book before I had a child. I think I found it too late, but it's great. It's great for toddlers, it's great for preschool, it's great for primary and secondary. And she is really big on acknowledging the feeling. So just paraphrasing and batting back and reflecting. And that again has been really powerful. And you might have a student that might be being seen to be being a little bit unreasonable. I know that happens sometimes. And sometimes just acknowledging that feeling, even when people are being completely unreasonable, just stopping and saying, you're really cross. This this has made you really angry. I can see that you're not happy. Even just that nod towards how they're feeling, I think is massive in terms of how successfully you're then able to engage them. I'm just going to do a very quick time check because I'm terrible and I'm not going to run over, and I'm determined. Right, these are some ridiculous things that I have done, or we have done in our setting and previous settings, to try to delight our students. So these are all very niche, very subjective things that have worked for particular students. But I just wanted to give you some real concrete examples of small things that we've done that have had a big payoff in terms of student engagement. So all of these things are the equivalent to very small deposits into our working relationship bank accounts that have really paid off. So I'll dip into a few of these and see how many I have time for. So the first one, the perfect hot chocolate. Doesn't that sound ridiculous? We had a year 11 student join us last year. He was a selective mute. He would not talk to any of us. He definitely did not want us to teach him any maths or English. And it was really difficult to work out what we were going to do and how we might be successful in engaging him. And his mum revealed that he really liked hot chocolate, and that actually he'd gone to great lengths to create an Excel spreadsheet about all of the hot chocolates he'd had in the past. So for me, this was a call to action. I am a barista and I started at Costa Coffee and I know my roots. So I was absolutely determined to try to make it onto his hot chocolate spreadsheet. I think I got an 8 out of 10. And some of the Orchard House members of staff that are here, they might remember the day that I got my 8 out of 10 because it was a big day for me. But it sounds ridiculous. I would spend a good 10 minutes sneaking off and making this student a hot chocolate. I tried all the variables. We had all the marshmallows and the cream and the flakes. And he loved that I tried. And actually, this boy did start to talk to us after a while. And actually, we were able to teach him some maths and some English. And I strongly believe that by seeing us try to meet his needs in this way, it really fostered that connection and added some real positive deposits into our working relationship bank account. There were little Sims plus signs going up every time I tried, I think. Macedonian coin cake, has anyone heard of this? Vasilopita, I think it's pronounced. So again, this is a very niche example. We had a lovely student who was from Macedonia. She felt very misunderstood. She felt that people didn't know where Macedonia was or anything about the country she came from. I think genuinely I took 10 minutes online and I learned some facts about Macedonia, and I told her the facts the next time I saw her, and she was just beaming from ear to ear. She was delighted. And she told me about this cake that Macedonian families might make for New Year. It's a cake with a coin hidden inside, and then when the cake's sliced up, whoever gets the coin is going to have a good year. So it's kind of like the sixpence in the Christmas pudding. That would be my reference point. But actually, because I'd taken the time to find these common points of reference with this student, and she'd told me about this coin cake, we kept coming back to it. And everything that was going well in her life, we'd say, it's because of the cake, it's because you got the coin this year, this is your year. And that connection was really far-reaching. And actually, this was a student that was at risk of being excluded, that then managed to stay in her mainstream school. So these tiny micro connections seem really silly and might to some people seem really pointless, but actually investing the time in them, I think, massively pays off. What can I tell you about laminated turtles? My husband once came down in the middle of the night and I was laminating pictures of turtles with one eye closed like this, for a student who really liked turtles. We made him a chart with turtles and he was absolutely delighted, and went on to do some really successful things. Lord of the Rings was a book that one of our students was obsessed with last year. I downloaded it on Audible. I thought I'll have a listen. I'll see if I can find a way to connect with this student. It's 32 hours long, Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I somewhat regretted that. And I didn't listen to the whole thing. And I'm going to be really honest about that. But sometimes I would put it on in the car on the way to school, and just having those common points of reference in terms of talking about the characters was just gold dust with this student. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm not going to go through Pokemon Go because I'm still scarred. I basically had to learn the names of all the different Pokemon characters, and I had to go into the woods and try to find them. And yeah, but one of my students was delighted about this. And again, we managed to teach him some maths, we managed to teach him some English. So I feel like it was worth investing the time into Pokemon Go. I'm not sure I would do it again with that one. Quickly, the power of pets. This won't take long. Students love talking about their pets. They love it. Staff love talking about their pets too. It doesn't feel too much to share. Ask students about their pets. And what I do, which sometimes I feel a bit sneaky about, is I make notes, and I keep notes. And if you can remember to ask John about his dog Milo, you are earning massive relationship plus points. You are really putting deposits into that working relationship bank account. Ask students about their pets. I'm sure it's a winner every time. So these are just a few take homes. I would like to just quickly say that the kind of counter argument to doing all this really lovely, detailed, delighting, and a counter argument I've heard lots of times from people is, why are you pandering to students in this way? This isn't real life. Why are you doing this? You're not setting students up for real life here. And I've heard this a lot. And initially it floored me, and I thought, okay, I can see that that's the case. I remain convinced though that meeting students where they are and doing whatever you need to do in order to do that is the first step to being able to move them on to be successful. You're not going to be able to make hot chocolates every day. You're not going to be able to play Pokemon Go all the time. And students know that. But just that nod towards connection for me is a game changer. And I'm not going to stop doing it. Have I got time to go through this slide? I have, I think. So these are 3 take-home things that I think you could do without taking too much, without depleting you too much, without taking too much of your time and your energy. And I hope you agree. So the first step is to de-alien a little bit. Is there anything about yourself that you could be sharing with your students that doesn't cross into the realms of being completely unprofessional, but that gives them a little insight into your life, and a little appreciation for the fact that you're a human being first and a teacher second? Pets is a good one. So secondly, identify a student that you are maybe in the red with. Maybe your relationship bank account isn't as healthy as it could be. Maybe you're in arrears. I think it was Rita Pearson in her TED talk. It's brilliant. If you haven't seen it, please go and find it. It's called Every Kid Needs a Champion. And she had said, hilariously, and she's so right, you're not going to like every student. And the students you don't like can't know that you don't like them. And this is a great thing to use with those students that you really are struggling to connect with. find one student that you can think of who you don't have that positive working relationship with, and really dig in and try to find a way to delight them. You only need do it once. You only need try it once. And sometimes that feels a little bit tokenistic, and it feels a little bit like I'm only doing this so that I can get the student to engage. And that can sit quite uncomfortably, and I have certainly felt like that when I'm doing this. But I think if you know that you are trying to engage from a true place of wanting to help, that the fact that you're looking at things that the student is interested in, as long as that's coming from a good place in terms of wanting to foster connection, I would say go for it. And lastly, I do this. I have a notebook. It's my knowledge bank. I write down the names of the pets and the scores of the hot chocolates, and anything else, the names of the Pokemon and where they were hiding, anything else that you need, any of the detail, because again, we can't be expected to hold all of that detail in mind all the time. We are human beings, and sometimes just to outsource that is really nice. And even if this is just something that you glance at every now and again, it's a really useful resource to have. How long have I got left? 2 minutes. Goodness me, I think I'm there. So finally, I'd like to say I would absolutely love if anyone does try any of this delighting malarkey. I know as educators we all do these things anyway, but if anyone wants to try any of the stuff that I've talked about today, I would absolutely love to hear from you. I would be so excited, in fact, to hear from you. So my Twitter handle is @Jo Slifi. I am going to start actively tweeting about anything that I do to delight and engage. And I'm going to use the hashtag delight and engage. So I would really, really love for you to let me know if you've tried any of these things and how they worked for you. Thank you all so much for giving me 40 minutes of your precious time. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the day. I maxed out today in terms of talks. I don't think I've even had a loo break or a lunch break. It's been such a fantastic experience being able to do this, and thank you all very much. Please get in touch and take care.
Thank you, Jo. Brilliant.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.